these words that we're going to read come from Moses. It's Moses who is speaking here. And this is his final words, kind of his final cheerleading before the nation of Israel enters the promised land. So this is the leader of people of faith who are going to where they have been called to. And this is what he has to say. And so let us read from the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 4, verses 1 and 2. It reads as follows. Now Israel, hear the decrees and laws I am about to teach you. Follow them so that you may live and may go and take possession of the land of the Lord, the God of your ancestors, is giving you. Do not add to what I command to you, and do not subtract from it. But keep the commands of the Lord your God that I give you. This is the word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
Thanks be to God indeed. I grew up, in part, in Walpole, New Hampshire. Quite a drive away from Central Virginia. And then for the rest of my young time, I grew up on the Eastern Shore, and many of you know that. But one thing held constant in my life, and it's funny now that I literally live almost on top of it, and that's Interstate 81. When I lived in New Hampshire, it sometimes was a 2-day drive. Sometimes we did it all in one day. It depended on what my dad decided to do. And when we lived on the Eastern Shore, we knew it was about an 8-hour haul, and it was what it was. We were always coming to the valley for one reason, and that was to visit my grandmothers. One lived back near Lake Robinson in Rockbridge County in the middle of nowhere. And my nanny lived in Lithia, Virginia, which I made Kim one time on a trip back from Roanoke go through the metro Lithia area to see our home church of our family. But there's one thing that I always smile about when I drive south on 81, and some of you will be familiar with it. As you drive down 81 and you start to get into Botetourt County, you'll see there's an exit called Arcadia, and then there's 2 exits, one right after another, for Buchanan. It's spelled Buchanan, but it's Buchanan if you're from there. And without fail, when we got to the Arcadia exit, we know that the second exit, where Cox's Gulf is, that second Buchanan exit was where we got off to go to my grandmother's house. And when you got to the Arcadia exit, 3 things happened. One, we used to call my mom the rake, because out came the brush. And I don't know why she seemed to think that we needed to have our hair perfect to see my grandmother, but you could bet the farm when you got to the Arcadia exit, out comes the brush. The second thing that came out was the lecture. And it sounded a lot like what Moses was telling his people. Do not add or subtract from what I am telling you now, because we are going to the land in which we are promised, the land that we're headed to, and heed these things and do so in the name of God. It never failed that part of the lecture would be, don't embarrass us Sunday in church. That was part of the lecture. And the third part was, we then were given great instruction on how we were to approach my grandmothers. My mom's mom lived in a nice house with indoor plumbing and all the things that you and I have. My dad's mom had an outhouse, no running water, a dirt floor in one room, and we had to be coached on what to say and not to say. When you went to Grandma Cart's, be happy that you had some squirrel to eat, and if you didn't want to eat the squirrel, act it like you did and leave it there, because squirrel dinner might be what you get. Straight up the truth. And Nans, don't be fussing, don't cuss, don't act crazy. I don't know about y'all. Does anybody else have this lecture? Don't use all the water. The biggest fear in my mom's life was that the well would run dry at my grandmother's because we would use too much water. I swear to you. I will get my brother and he will attest to the lecture of don't use all the water. I don't know why. Nan's house was next to a creek. But go figure. I hope you understand my point. My point is that Moses was trying to impart on the people he was leading. I've already taught you everything that you need to know. Now just go do it. We're headed to where we've been called, but I've taught you. And I've taught you the Word of God from God's own mouth. So there's no need for you to think about adding to it or subtracting to it because it's perfect. Just follow directions. And if you'll follow directions, where we're headed to, you'll see how good it is. You'll see that God has set up for us something that is perfect, something that is the land of milk and honey, something that when we get there, you'll know that that's where we were called to be. The problem is, church, we often don't listen to the authorities in our life who have been there, done that. I had to reflect on why my mom gave us that lecture. And don't any of y'all show her this sermon. The first thing I think of is the way she was brought up. There was just certain things that my pawpaw and my nanny, that's the way things were done. You know, be mindful of your mouth, make sure that your clothes are tucked in, have your hair combed, yes ma'am, no ma'am, you know, that whole deal. If you do that, you show some respect. It's one basic lesson from that. Another reason is that she just flat out didn't want to be embarrassed. I get it, right? When you take your kids or your family somewhere, you want to make sure that they got some home training. You don't want folks to just go, I can't believe what that kid does. And you know we all do it, right? Whether you're the owner of that wild child or whether you know a family that has the wild kid, we all do it, right? Man, that kid needs to be smacked in the mouth. If he did that in my house, I would knock him out. Not forgetting the fact that your kid run around acting crazy too, but that's okay. That's for another day. And the third thing that I think that the reason that I got the lecture, to be honest with you, just came from a pure sense of love. Here's some things that I want you to think about. Because if you can get these right, other things will fall into place. Now, I want you to think about that for a minute, right? If you'll just mind your manners, yes ma'am, no ma'am, yes sir, no sir, and speak when spoken to when you're younger, that'll take you a long way, right? You'll earn some respect from your elders. And that'll get you out of a little trouble too. The second thing that I learned from it is that you don't have to be dressed perfect, but at least when you're dressed, look the part, right? Why? Well, because it just shows some respect, not of yourself, but of the people that you deal with. And the third reason I thought I got those lectures was to ingrain in me the kinds of things that should be imparted on my kids and on the kids that I work with. And so I have to find myself laughing sometimes that when I'm getting on my own sons and my daughter-to-be, or kids in my classroom, I sound a whole lot like my mom at times. The same lectures. Hey, if you would sit down and once in a while just say yes ma'am, no ma'am, yes sir, no sir, your life would be a lot better. You understand that? Yeah, coach. Right? Sounds just like my mom. Moses understood that he was dealing with an unruly bunch, right? They were struggling at times with their faith. They hadn't listened to God as well as they should have. They had been bounced around some, and he's literally giving them a lecture. Right over there is what we've been promised. Don't act a fool. Keep your hair combed. Yes, sir, and no, sir would be nice. Don't show your tail to everybody. Can you just do what you've been taught? God has given us a really good plan. He's given us really good guidance. I've spoken to him personally. Here's the things he'd like us to do. If we could just do some of those, the promised land would actually be the land that he has promised us. Otherwise, we can continue to do what we've been doing and acting a fool, and it's probably not going to go so well for us. So, guys, before we get in the car and go there, could we just do these few things? Could you comb your hair? Could you tuck in your shirt? Could you say yes, ma'am, and go give your grandmother a hug? Can you just eat the squirrel gravy? Yeah, you'd have to eat the squirrel gravy there, Princess Fowl.
It's the best.
It's the best. You'd have been great in the car with us, Kathy. Shoot, you'd have been Grandma Cart's favorite right then and there. So I hope you see what I'm trying to impart this morning, right? And that is the lessons that we've been taught by our elders, particularly our moms. Sometimes they sound like fussing, but if we would just pump our brakes for a minute and listen to what they're really telling us, they're giving us really good advice. Moses understood that the teachings that he had been given came straight from the Word of God, sometimes directly from the mouth of God. And why wouldn't he want his people that he's leading to follow those directions? Because if they're already perfected directions, why would you want to add or subtract from anything that you've been taught? He's just reminding them of that before they get there. So I hope that if any of you are traveling down Interstate 81 anytime soon, you're headed south, and you get to the Arcadia exit, I hope for a second you get a little smile on your face. And you think the old pastor and the fact that he used to get a really hard comb or a plastic brush raked across his head so that the part was right. And that you think kindly of the Word of God. I hope if you ever get to the Arcadia exit and you drive through and you see the Buchanan exits, it just makes you think of the fact we've already been taught perfection. We've been given all of the direction and instruction that we need. It's just up to us to internalize it, to apply it, and to pass it on. So moms, if somebody tells you this week that you're nagging them, that's okay. Impart the wisdom that you've been given and tell your youngins, do not add or subtract from what I have taught you, for I have taught you well. And if you're saying that, you're paraphrasing exactly what Moses told the nation.